Most people want to break out of prison. Some of us are trying to break in. If you think airport security is tight, try Israel's Erez crossing. And once you get to the other side, take the walk of shame through a 2-kilometer-long enclosure. The earth looks drier. Even the air feels different. Welcome to the Strip. For locals, you can't check out anytime you like, and you can hardly ever leave. Times are tough. Many don't have the basics. The daily bureaucracy is grinding. The scars of war etched everywhere. People live in constant fear of another one. And depending on who you ask, they're either governed by resistance fighters or terrorists. I'm Imran Garta, and I've come to the place they call the world's largest open-air prison, to meet the guards. Join me as I journey across the Strip to find out what's at the heart of Hamas's leadership.
I can swear that we are going to liberate Palestine, whole Palestine.
I'll spend time with Hamas. Speak to locals frustrated with a lack of opportunity.
Of course the leadership is extremely far away from the people.
Visit smuggling tunnels at the Egyptian border with the group's military wing, the Qassam Brigades.
Okay, I don't have much time. The Egyptians are yelling. Hamas is okay on this side of the border.
And head to Qatar to speak with Khaled Meshaal, who led Hamas for the past 13 years. His final act? Unveiling the group's new face to the world. Or is it? Gaza, a strip that hugs the Mediterranean Sea. The main arteries manned by young soldiers. Checkpoints every few blocks. Who's it for? My driver was happy to get some business. And he said to me, Gaza is beautiful, if bombs didn't rain down. Monuments, statues, graffiti, remembering the fallen. Also reminders of who is in charge. Hamas is a child of the Israeli occupation, born after the First Intifada. It rose as an alternative to leftist Palestinian leadership. As an acronym, it translates to Islamic Resistance Movement. But as a word, it means zeal, a trait it proudly wears. The group sprang to life from the most vulnerable parts of Gaza, like Jabalia refugee camp. It's tightly packed, densely populated, with a disproportionate number of children.
If you're unfamiliar with the conflict or the history, you'd be forgiven for thinking that all of this just sprung up like in the past year or two, and these people are newly created refugees, but that's not the case. There are refugee camps like this all over the Gaza Strip and in other parts of the occupied Palestinian territory. And you look around, this is how people live. There are children everywhere. They live as refugees. They rely on the UN for food aid, for their schooling. There aren't many economic prospects here. This is how their parents lived, and for some of them, their grandparents. It's been going on for almost 70 years. And it's not difficult to see why these people would support uncompromising leadership that says, no, we resist, we fight. You know, we don't want to talk, we don't want to give and take because we have nothing to give.
هذه الحروب المتتالية تمام Consecutive wars and the lack of involvement by the international community in any way has assured us of their indifference in regards to any issue that involves Israel and the other side, which is the Palestinians. The international community has always stood with the Israeli occupiers. Okay, we have taken up a few weapons to resist against occupation, to resist for our dignity and our human rights. However, we've always been the ones with the fewer weapons.
But Hamas attacks on Israeli civilians have defined the movement for some members of the international community. To them, Hamas is heartless and extreme. In May, Khaled Meshaal, who led Hamas for over 10 years, revealed an updated charter that appeared to soften some of the group's original positions. It may have been an attempt to reinvent their image and redefine just who Hamas considers a target in the name of resistance. We'll find out when I ask him.
Donkey coming through.
So far, I've told you a lot about strife, war, death. But the Friday Bazaar in Shuja'iyya is bursting with life. And these people are hustling. Underneath the vibrance, Gaza has one of the highest unemployment rates in the world, hovering near 50%. And those who make a living struggle to find customers.
مش نافعة والسوق تعبان ولا في بيع ولا في شراء فيش مصاري بيروح الواحد في الاشي على السوق بروحوا على البيت زي ما هو.
الكهرباء بنشوفها في اليوم 4 ساعات بس. 4 ساعات وفي مناطق بيشوفوش الكهرباء.
But I heard 8. I heard it's 8 hours here.
مناطق تانية بتيجي 8 أما في مناطق 4 ساعات.
What can the authorities do to make it better for you? What can those who are in control do to make it better for you?
إنه يكون في شغل بغزة. إنه يصير الناس تطلع برا غزة، المعابر تفتح، يصير الناس تطلع تجيب مصاري. أما طول ما هم هان ما فيش مصاري، ما فيش شغل. يعني طلع في السوق كليتهم بياعين هنا، أما الناس تيجي تسوق ب50 شيكل. اللي بيجي بيسوق ب50 شيكل، إيش يشتري ب50 شيكل؟ فيش دخل على الناس.
باي باي.
نعم بكل تأكيد يعني.
Of course, the leadership is extremely far away from the people.
كامل عن الشعب.
For the past 10 years, the Gaza Strip, whether from the coup or from the Palestinian split, has lived 10 years under injustice and oppression and siege. And the only people enduring this is the people, not the leadership.
We have a big number of highly educated people. 98.3% are educated, and many of them are in need for jobs. The open channel was Egypt, and that was open through the Egyptian era. And after that, when they closed the border, it actually became an overburdening.
I wanted to better understand the blockade for myself, so I went to the Rafah crossing, Gaza's border with Egypt, that has been closed since 2015. Another reminder of a locked-up people. We were escorted by senior members of the Qassam Brigades, Hamas's military wing. The line between being hosted and censored was thin. Permission to film and permission denied swapped with regularity. But our escorts took us somewhere a bit further out, to a place no journalist has been to in years at Rafah. Hamas dug tunnels.
عن طريق اللجنة منسقين. عن طريق مكتب اللواء، الإعلام الحكومي، عن طريق
I don't have much time because the Egyptians are yelling on their side. Hamas is okay on this side, but I want to make this quick. It gives me a bit of an opportunity to explain the blockade to you. Now, the Israelis say there's no longer an occupation of Gaza because they pulled out their settlers in 2004. And while that might be true, they still control the airspace, the sea space, and most of the border around the Gaza Strip. They strictly control what goes in and out, and they only let in the very basic goods. I'm looking at Egypt right now. It, over the past few years, has been tremendously strict as well. They keep it shut most of the time. To try and skirt those restrictions, Palestinians relied on a tunnel economy. They built things such as these. Now, anything and everything made it through these things. Sometimes livestock, people, medicine, food, sometimes weapons. And that's one of the reasons why the Egyptians are absolutely ferocious in bulldozing the tunnels on the other side. They flood them from time to time. The Israelis bomb them from time to time. So even that little lifeline to spur the economy and give Gazans what they want has largely been cut off.
And as we turned around and headed back to safety, the driver peered out at the desolate streets and told me the glory days of the tunnels are over. Everyone used to be so rich.
I am here too sure. I can swear that we are going to liberate Palestine, whole Palestine, in time too much nearer to your imagination.
I asked Zahar if it's true that Hamas targets civilians while Israel does not.
This is a fabricated story. They reverse the fact. We are fighting against the armed people, and they are destroying houses, towers, and civilian. This house was destroyed 3 times.
You've suffered personal loss. Your son's killed. You injured, your wife injured, your daughter injured. As you have suffered personal loss, have you become more or less compromising?
Compromising is a misleading name. Do you believe that we are ready to denounce our right in our land, homeland, Palestine? The answer, no.
But is compromise exactly what Hamas is doing? Or are they trying to appeal to multiple audiences, a committed base, the international community, and their enemies all at the same time? It was time to visit Meshaal to try to extract some clarity and talk about the new charter.
Khaled Meshaal, thank you very much for joining us. So, is Hamas changing? This is a new charter.
Welcome to you and the viewers of your respectful channel. Hamas is changing, it is evolving. Like any living organism, it has vitality. And it regenerates, has its own personality, and has a future. This is normal and we are proud of this. What Hamas presented is a document, not a charter. The first charter of Hamas was in 1988. Now we have a document in 2017. This reflects the natural evolution of Hamas political thought and performance. Yes, Hamas is evolving. It is a player. In the political document, it presents a balanced, a creative and authentic model. How to resist and adhere to the rights of people and nationalistic ideals that do not compromise and play games with principles while at the same time remaining open-minded and open to the regional and international environment. Knowing the laws of the conflict, how to manage a conflict, when to advance and when to stay back.
Did you see what Netanyahu did with it? He had the document in his hands and he crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. Did you see that?
I saw the video. I was very pleased and happy to know that the document's message reached the world, and that is what annoyed Netanyahu. Praise be to Allah. Our resistance is our steadfastness on the ground, and our people's connection to the land bothers the Israeli leadership and disturbs these Israeli killers.
What do you most regret when you were leader?
I'm not sorry for anything because I didn't do anything except to serve my cause and serve my people. We do not kill indiscriminately. We believe in resistance. We resisted on the ground against the Israeli occupation only. We did not enter into conflicts with others. We did not neglect the principles and rights of our people. I do not regret anything. It doesn't mean that we didn't make mistakes. If you look at the details, sure we have. We made decisions and they may not be the best. Also in the details, there are successes and failures. A majority of decisions were good and some were bad. But in the general strategies and tactics, I don't think we made any mistakes, and instead, we were successful and offered a unique and productive model by the grace of Allah.
What is the main difference between the Hamas of 1988 coming out with a charter in a refugee camp in occupied Palestine and the Hamas of 2017 with their new charter, you call it a document, not a charter, at the Sheraton in Doha, Qatar, with the international press there? What's the main difference between those two Hamases?
أكيد هناك فوارق.
Sure, there are differences, but there are no differences in the origin of the project. Hamas of the 1988 is the same Hamas as 2017. In terms of resistance, commitment to Palestinian rights, its view on national Palestinian project, protecting our national unity and belief in its Arab, Islamic and humanitarian background. These principles haven't changed. We resist the occupier and we are against the settlements. We hold to our land, Jerusalem, and the right to return. We refuse occupation, settlement, aggression. We are concerned for our prisoners that are in the occupier's jail, and we are proud of our martyrs. This is Hamas. It has not changed. But sure, there are differences between Hamas 87, 88, and now. After 30 years, there are differences. The first difference is the time between the moment of birth and the lifespan of Hamas, which is now 30 years old. Just like a human changes from the day it is born until the day it reaches 30 years old.
I'm sorry to keep focusing on this charter, but I need to get clarity on something. The core of that document in 1988 seems to suggest that Muslims and Jews fight each other. It also seems to suggest that there'll be no compromise whatsoever on the land, no recognition of the 1967 borders. All of historical Palestine goes back to its historical owners. That's the core of the 88 charter. The core of this document seems to suggest, hey, or more than suggest, 1967, cool, those borders are fine. A Palestinian state, which seems to suggest an implicit recognition of Israel. It doesn't say the words, but it recognizes Israel, and it says we're not fighting Jews, we're fighting Zionists. You can understand that there's a massive difference in the language between the two, which is why those from the outside, people from the outside, us, we look at it and we go, this is a huge departure, this is an abrogation, this is a major change in policy. You can understand that, can't you?
The language of the original charter reflects the first moments of Hamas and the environment of the Intifada, the harshness of the occupation, and as you remember, the Israeli bone-breaking approaches. So the expressions in the original charter were emotional responses, and did it contain much political jargon. But it reflected the feelings of the Palestinian nation and its natural emotions while facing the occupation. This new document has the same spirit, but is expressed in a more balanced, calm and straightforward way. But truthfully, the question about the war against the occupiers, our philosophy hasn't changed since the beginning. We're not fighting Israelis because of their religion. We fight those who occupy our lands. If a Muslim occupied our land, we will fight them. If it was a Christian, we will fight them. If they are Jewish, we will fight them. The basis for resistance is the occupation, not religious differences, especially in Palestine. The region in general, but Palestine specifically, has a history of religious diversity and coexistence among civilizations with many different religions. This is Palestine, the Holy Land, the blessed land, the land of prophets and messengers, the land of Abrahamic faiths. Naturally, coexistence and forgiveness are a general principle and part of this land, and Hamas is part of this environment and this land. So Hamas already understands this. This is not new to Hamas. So the language in the document, without a doubt, is clearer and more sophisticated and capable of delivering the message to others. The other side is the issue of 1967. This is what it means to develop and move forward, how to deal with the developments over time and how this affects the conflict with the occupier, and Hamas leadership position in the conflict and how Hamas makes political decisions. This is something we do and others do as well. Now, what's the difference between us and others? Others have put forth a political agenda, but drifted away from their core. Their political engagement contradicts their political principles and is far removed from their origins and their national ideals. Hamas is making choices and is trying new things, but remains committed to dealing with the conflict from a strategic point of view that fulfills its natural principles, and this is the authenticity that Hamas has offered. In regard to the admission that you spoke about, in my opinion, it does not require any ambiguous interpretation or any incorrect conclusions. The document is crystal clear. It states clearly a declaration of the illegitimacy of the occupation, our claim to all Palestine, Jerusalem, the right of return, and the resistance. These are clear principles. The language in Article 20 about the 1967 borders was also very clear. This is a project based on establishing a state on the 4th of June 1967 borders, with the capital being Jerusalem. It also includes the right of return granted to those forcibly displaced and refugees to the areas that they were expelled from. This is a national initiative that is shared with others to make our national reconciliation easier so we can work together to resist the occupation, but without compromising our rights and our national principles and without acknowledging Israel.
Okay, only one player enforces the occupation. That's Israel. But two players enforce the siege on Gaza. That's Israel and it's Egypt, right? Two countries. And is that the reason why Hamas has to get closer to Egypt in order to break the siege from that side? And is that why we're seeing all the Ikhwan, all the Muslim Brotherhood references being thrown out of this new document in order to make Egypt happy because Hamas needs to get closer to Egypt? Is that what we're seeing here?
Since its founding, Hamas has been keen to maintain a strong relationship with Egypt and with all Arab and Muslim nations, and to open up to the world, because the Palestinian issue is tied to regional and international currents as well as to the Ummah. And Egypt, as the largest Arab country on one hand, and the fact that it shares a border with Palestine and Gaza, having a relationship is natural. We are the ones who initiated a relationship with Egypt starting in the 80s and 90s, and this is something that's part of Hamas philosophy regarding managing relationships. Today, our family in Gaza is suffering under 10 years of a blockade, an unjust blockade. And Gaza is paying the price of the strength of the resistance and not succumbing to the Israelis' will on the one hand, and on the other hand, our winning of the elections in 2006. Whoever voted for Hamas was punished and blockaded. Even those who voted for us in the West Bank are struggling under occupation and settlements and security repression. So we're struggling from this blockade, but our relationship with Egypt isn't just tied to the blockade. It is tied to a political philosophy with important regional actors, with all Muslim countries and the people inside the countries, and also the governments and the organizations. I've no doubt that Egypt is a key player in lifting the siege imposed on Gaza and opening up the border crossing. So that's why we've worked hard to keep our relationship open with Egypt and visit them and reach an agreement in which they open the border and lift the blockade that Israel is responsible for.
You went to South Africa in October 2015, my country. You seemed quite happy to be there. Now, the South Africa solution is something people bring up for Palestine. They talk of one state, one man, one vote. White people didn't get kicked out. There was a political resolution. And everybody lived under this democratic umbrella. Is that something you would want for Palestine, where Jews, Muslims, Christians can all live under one democratic state as equal citizens and not a two-state solution? Is that something you'd like?
Of course, I am really proud of my visit to South Africa and the great people of South Africa who set a world-class example of how the will of people can liberate a country from occupation or a racist system. But the difference, my dear friend, is significant. The lesson is in the essence of the issue. What is that essence? You can call it a single-state solution or any other name you want. That is not what was important in South Africa. The important thing was that the situation reached a point when the rights of the native people of South Africa were realized or not. I believe that the leaders of the racist system in South Africa at that historic moment in history, at the end of the 20th century, realized their project had reached a dead end. The international community pulled away any cover that they previously had. For this reason, a solution was attainable. This is not the situation in the Palestinian cause today. Israel does not even believe in any solution or agreement or peace. It deceives the world with negotiations. But it does not even take away basic rights of the Palestinians. The evidence? Palestinians have offered many decisions, discussions, and even concessions. And even the Arab did so. But Israel always answers with contempt and rejection. Because Israel firstly feels that it has a military advantage, unfortunately, in the entire region. And then it has an international community that will protect it. It will protect it with vetoes, support it with weapons, with political decisions, with money to its economy. So it does not feel that it needs to succumb to the logic of the moment and acknowledge the rights of the Palestinian people. As long as Israel thinks this way, and the international community does not lift its cover from this project that will definitely reach a dead end, then talk of a two-state or one-state solution is useless.
So when we were in Gaza, we went to the Shuja'iyya market on a Friday, and I remember, there was one guy who was talking about the electricity cuts, and I asked about the 8 hours of electricity that people get a day, and he said, 8 hours? Are you crazy? It's 4 hours. And he blamed the Israelis, he blamed the Egyptians, but he also blamed Hamas, and lots of people blamed Hamas as well for the struggle that they have in Gaza. Many people told us they should make life better for us because they are in charge of this place. What's your message for those people who are living a really, really tough life? They're having a really tough time of it in Gaza, under siege, and with no economic prospects. What's your message to them?
Of course, our hearts and minds are with our people in Gaza who are suffering from this blockade and its impact on everyday life, on treatment, education, travel, the electricity. For sure, it is severe suffering. But I would like to tell my cherished people that your brothers and sisters in the West Bank are suffering from the occupation and settlements. And your people here and abroad are suffering as well. We are living under occupation. And we are battling with this wicked occupier, and everyone is struggling to different degrees. The big question is whether Hamas is working to end this blockade and whether it is working to end these electricity shortages and other issues. It is working. However, there is a difference between going through rational channels to solve these problems or executing an agenda that others would like us to follow through with.
Khaled Meshaal, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us.
Welcome.
As I watched Meshaal's successor, Ismail Haniyeh, deliver the Friday sermon in a Gaza mosque, I wondered if this was Hamas. Leadership on the ground, among the people, in squeezed and struggling Gaza. Or if Hamas was now an evolved and complex movement of a new charter or document, trading uncompromising ideals for some necessary political pragmatism in the face of Israeli occupation. Something is changing with Hamas, but how much? And will it help bring an end to the suffering of its people and bring about more international support for its cause?